And tonight on PM Express, another 60 million cedis gone under the rail as the Electricity Company of Ghana admits to purchasing faulty and non-fit for purpose prepaid meters 5 years ago that are still sitting there undeployed. Remember, this is coming at a time the country is struggling to fix inefficiencies as a power supplier and maximize profit. Then we are told that in 2020, the Auditor General is telling us that its report on the public boards, corporations, and other statutory institutions indicates the ECG made a 24.3% loss of its revenue for 2020, which the report says could affect profitability and viability of that company. This is what we'll be breaking down for you on PM Express, because for the whole of that year, you would realize that power purchased always exceeded power sold, and there was no single profits made for the company. There's also the bit about some electrical materials amounting to a whooping 11,581,000 cedis that were given out on loan without any agreement. But who runs a company like this? Let's get the breakdown from the Auditor General's report, because we want to find out how we can plug the loopholes at the ECG. So the 2020 Auditor General report, it reveals wastage of prepaid meters valued at almost 60 million cedis procured 5 years ago. The Energy Minister today is unhappy and is describing the development as a clear case of irresponsibility. This is how I break it down for you. Power purchased versus power sold. Now, for that whole year, we sold 10,900,55 gigawatts per hour. And then that's what we purchased. And then we sold 8,251.47 gigawatts per hour. And so you can do the deduction for yourself and you realize that there's a big loss here. That's not the only thing. This translates into ECG losing 2,649.08 gigawatts per hour, which represents 24.30% of power purchased from the power producing companies to system losses. And we can do the breakdown of percentage here too. This is despite the creation of revenue protection divisions and installation of automatic meter reading. You remember this thing? It was supposed to help the ECG bridge the gap of losses and maximize profits. Has that happened? No. We'll be looking at that as well when the conversation gets into full swing. In effect, ECG lost 24.3% of its revenue for the year, and this could affect the profitability and viability according to the Auditor General. So this is the breakdown. In January, we purchased 906.01 versus what we sold, which is 688.54. Clear loss there. 858.75 in February versus 651.46 sold in February. That's another loss there. 957.71 in March, and compared to 605.13 sold, that's a huge gap there, which we lost. 939.51 sold in April, and then over here, you can see that there's the gap has bridged a little, because from 939.51 purchased, we sold 827.91. So we bridged the gap in April, but that couldn't be sustained by the ECG, because if you move on to May and the rest of the months, you realize that in May, 927.23 was purchased, and we sold 776.57. In June, 867.53 was sold, and that was purchased, and we sold 685.85. In July, 870 purchased, and we sold 636.78. In August, 865.27, we sold 665.9. And then in September, 857.24, we sold 631.11. In October, 922.47, we sold 715.3. November, 939.33. We sold 679.87. And December, 989.27. We sold 687.04. Clear loss for the ECG. Now, let's look at its breakdown in percentage-wise. So, in January, this is what we lost, 24.00%. In February, 24.14% for February. In March, that is 6.81%. It looks like that's the highest in March. That's what we lost. In April, 11.88%. And you remember I told you that was where we bridged the gap a little in the purchasing and the selling at ECG. Now, in May, we lost 16.25%. In June, 20.94%. In July, 26.83%. In August, 23.04%. In September, 26.38%. In October, 22.46%. 46%. In November, 27.62%. And in December, 30.55%. You could see clearly on this graph that it wasn't going down, it was actually going up. So the losses were aggravating as the year was getting to an end. And tonight, that's what we're asking. How do we plug the loopholes? I mean, we've had this conversation before. How do we strengthen ECG? How do we maximize profits at Electricity Company of Ghana? We've had our challenges with power. How does all of this translate into power supply? We'll get into action after this break. My guest tonight, Kojo Poku, he's energy analyst. He joins me in the studio. Thanks so much for coming, Kojo. It's been a while. Good to see you.
Yes. Joy News has abandoned me.
Oh, no.
I've taken it in good faith.
It's never true.
I mean, when you go past your prime...
It will never happen.
When you go past your prime and nobody wants to see you, that's fine.
It will never happen.
I've gone past my prime now and nobody wants to see me. So.
You're still our sweetheart. Now, joining me also via Zoom is Edward Bauer. He's a member of the Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament. And he's also MP for Bongo constituency. Ishmael Echuahene, Ajekum Hene, I beg your pardon, who is a former chair of the Technical Committee of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, has also joined us. And later in this discussion, Frank Anodompre, who is a member of the newly appointed board, would also join the conversation. Gentlemen, I'm grateful that you all joined the conversation. Kojo, I spoke with you earlier and you're worried about the losses. But again, you say that they do not heed to advise. ECG, this is not the first time we are having a conversation about losses at ECG. We've been struggling over the period to make sure that ECG maximize profits and cuts all the losses that we've been having. Why are we here again?
Well, sometimes when the Auditor General comes out, Auditor General is really a report that it's a bit more historical. So if you look at the period that they dealt with 2014 to 2018. Okay. It doesn't reflect the current situation.
There's also 2019,
well,
actually.
I agree. I'm just trying to put it in perspective. So when we're having a conversation, somebody does not think that it is something that is current, persisting now. Maybe some of the things still persist. Okay. But these are 2014, 2018, 2019 discussion. Okay. Yes, ECG has losses. That one, nobody can deny it. Their losses are even higher now than what it was, which is stated in the report. In the report, it talks about 24 point something. Okay. The current losses has grown to 26.63. What it is now made up of 10% technical losses and 16.63% of financial, what you call commercial losses.
So currently it's
10% of technical losses and 16.63 of commercial losses.
Okay, that makes it 26.63.
Right. So what you have for technical losses for your viewers to understand is when you have old machines, when the electricity comes from the producer through the transmission lines into the ECG network, the old machines dissipates because it's copper wires and it's machinery. So some of the power get lost in the air. So when the power goes through the system, in the transformers, in the wire lines, before it gets to your house, 10% of total power, because the old, the outdated machines and the weak cables and all that dissipates 10% of the total produced electricity in the southern part.
Okay.
NETCO, we are not too sure. Then you have 16%, over 16% losses for commercial. That is to do with illegal connections, non-collection of tariffs.
Okay.
Then people trying to basically, you have a bill of, let's say, 10,000 Ghana cedis, the ECG guy come and say, give me 2,000, I'll pay for you, those things. Okay. So the commercial nature is where sometimes I have a concern, because that is responsibility of somebody who gets salary every month.
Yeah.
They're supposed to go into the areas and check the illegal metering. They're supposed to go and check the illegal connection. They're supposed to go and basically collect the money. Most of these collections are not done because people just don't do their work. So that is where I have a challenge. When you are not able to collect the money, you cannot invest the money. As a result, reduce the technical losses.
Yeah.
So over the years, government has always have to come in and bail out ECG by giving them guarantees to basically buy new machines or import new systems and stuff like that. So it's become a bit of a chicken and egg issue. Which one comes first? Do you need to improve your losses? Do you need to improve on the losses to save money, or do you need to collect the money to invest before you can save money? What will interest you is that the losses that we make is actually paid for by me and you.
Yeah.
Because PULC factor the losses into our tariffs.
Okay.
So if ECG is able to reduce these losses to the acceptable less than 10% combined, so total, what is over 26% now, should be less than 10%, so that me and you can have about 16% reduction in our electricity tariffs.
Interesting. Edward Bauer is there. He is a member of the Mines and Energy Committee. And if you look at the report, at a point, it talks about the ECG incurring expenses to the tune of 182 million as capacity charge by Senate Energy for 12 months in 2018. However, Senate supplied only 300 kilowatts per hour and 2,220 million kilowatts per hour in August and December, respectively, for the full year. The Auditor General says it advised management to ensure exit clauses are considered extensively before signing contracts. So clearly, there are issues also about ensuring efficiencies in the signing of contracts. But you have worked with the Ministry of Energy previously. These issues are not new to us. What do you think is accounting for all of this?
Hello, can you hear me?
Definitely.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear,
okay,
Mr. Bauer.
Good evening to my colleagues who are also on the panel and good evening to you yourself. First and foremost, let me state very clearly that issues, I would have commented on what Yopoko said, but I'll bring it that at the last part of it. The issue of capacity charges have not been treated transparently in this country. And so we are unable to really state what that animal is and how much it is costing us. I say this because, for example, recently there was a question that was put before the Minister of Finance as to how much capacity charges we had paid as a result of some particular companies. They had listed them. When the Minister of Finance came and gave us the figures, he gave it to us. Later on, we got to realize that he was not truthful to what they call Parliament, because the Chamber of Independent Power Producers came out and said those figures he quoted were figures that were monies that were paid for power used, not for capacity charges. And so it tells us that there's some level of lack of transparency in that. And I say this for obvious reasons. Today, as we speak, I'm just using the 2020 electricity supply plan that was done by Energy Commission. And this was done and chaired by Engineer Frank Ochire. You will realize that they indicate that if you look at our installed generation capacity, our installed generation capacity is roughly, they indicate 5,137.0. They tell us our dependable capacity at peak, that means at the time we need electricity most, our dependable capacity is 4,627.6. Now, they tell us that our peak, that was last year, as at half year. I know that the figures have gone higher now. Our peak demand, we're using 3,115. Asha, if you talk to anybody who has worked in the energy sector or just any who has just come out from the tech as an electrical engineer, he will tell you that for every power system, you need what we call redundancy or the spinning reserve. The spinning reserve, people have different calculations for, but on the average, they say about 20% of your peak demand. So what you use at your peak demand, at least 20% of it should be there as reserve margin. Said that if there's a problem, you can always push those ones in. So if you do 20% of 3,115, you are getting around 1,420. So that's 1,420. If you add that to 3,115, you have almost consumed the capacity because you are not getting around 4,500 something. That's why I say that those figures do not really add up. If you talk to people who really watch the industry very well, they tell you that, look, they indicate that, look, they say capacity charges, and they state them, but you do not know where the figures are coming from. That's the first point. That being said, it is important to also state very clearly that when my brother Kojo makes a point that if you look at the audit or Auditor General's report that has come, this is a historical data. As we speak now, Kojo mentions, for example, the the losses as being 26.6. This is what ECG will tell you when you ask them, and indeed they have given us that figure. However, when the Minister for Energy was meeting at the early part of this year, when the Energy Minister met the World Bank and was reporting the losses, he quoted 1% as the losses. So now, and he also indicates, and that's the point I'm also trying to make, Kojo indicates that the losses are calculated and they are supposed to be part of the tariff. Yeah. It is not entirely true. It is not entirely correct. What happens is that there's a bench they give you. So, for example, PURC has given ECG that their technical and commercial losses should not go beyond 21%. So anything beyond 21%, ECG will have to look for how they will have to pay for it. Okay. I don't know if that's making sense. They tell you that there's allowable losses for you for 21%. They give a different one for grid code. They give a different one for whoever is working on that. So it is 21. So it means that anything beyond 21%, ECG must find a way of dealing with that particular figure. That being also said, look at it. If you just use 21% of losses, it doesn't make very much sense for us. Let's go back and look at the monetary value for these particular losses. If you look at the Ministry of Energy's own report, that they have what they call the Energy Sector Recovery Program. They monetize the losses. And they say for 23%, at the time they wrote the report, they said for 23%, the amount they lose, ECG loses annually was equivalent to $400 million. That is value. So if you bring into Cedis, if let's say an exchange rate of 1 to 5, that's about $2 billion annually. Or 2 billion Ghana cedis, sorry, annually. So it gives you a fair idea about the quantum of losses we get as a result of this. If you look at this generally, then it tells you that if ECG were to be a private business, it would have collapsed by now. The only reason why it is still existing is because it's a state-owned one. And at any point, there's always a way of trying to intervene in their lives. So that is the basic problem that you have with ECG. And of course, I know that over the years, there has been an attempt to see how you can support ECG to reduce their losses. One of them, in terms of the commercial losses, was to introduce what we call the prepaid. And particularly for state ministries, departments, and agencies. Asha, let me tell you one thing. If you look at the annual losses as a result of default, people who do not pay the electricity bill, annually it's about 180 million Ghana cedis. Out of this amount, 150 million is owned by ministries, departments, and agencies. So they are owned by the state. I don't know if I the point again. So its private sector just owns roughly about $30 million. But the state itself, whether hospitals, schools, military barracks, and what have you, ministries, they default in payments to ECG to a tune of about $150 million annually. And then I'm not the one saying it. This is what the Ministry of Energy has captured in that document that I call the Energy Sector Recovery Plan. So if you look at all these figures, you see that ECG seriously is in big trouble. The trouble they are in now is higher than what the Auditor General indicates in his report.
Let me bring in Ishmael here before I bring you in, Kojo, because Kojo makes the point that all of this is translated into tariffs for the consumer. Ishmael, you've been with the PURC. What does this mean for the consumer?
Good evening, Aisha. Good evening to my brother Kojo Poku and Honorable Bauer. Before I get into what it means to the average consumer, let me also explain a few things and just also establish some facts. Having been on the PURC board for the past 3.5 years. I get worried when people like Honorable Bauer, who has worked in the Ministry of Energy and who is supposed to understand some of these things, when he tells us that he can't find where the excess capacity is coming from, it's worrisome. Excess capacity is simple, it's straightforward. You take all the contract, for the Senate contract, everybody knows that the capacity charges is part of the contract. So as for the capacity charge, whether you run the plant or you don't run the plant, you are supposed to pay. And I don't know whether the Auditor General went back to the people to explain some of the things to them, because some of the things the Auditor General found, I thought were not issues that he should have even brought up in the report. So I'm happy Honorable Bauer talked about reports by Energy Commission, and I would encourage everybody to look at the energy sector, the outlook, the energy supply and demand. There is still excess capacity, even if you add the spinning reserve, which is the reserve margin that he talked about. It's true that over the years since 2016, the excess is closing, and that is a good thing because we can't continue to pay for power which we don't use. I think if for any reason the minister gave Parliament wrong information, Honorable them should be able to get him to tell them what the real facts are. But as far as I know, we are paying for some idle capacity and excess capacity. That's a fact. It's not debatable. The contracts are there for everybody to see. And so let's establish that fact. And it's also not entirely true that, like he tried to explain, the PURC's regulatory benchmark for the combined technical and commercial losses changed from 21% to 22.6% from the end of 2018 entering into 2019. This is the reason. The compact, the agreement that we signed with PDS says that the losses as at the end of the last year that ECG operated was going to be used as the benchmark for their operation. So they were going to reduce the losses as incurred by ECG. And at the end of 2018, the losses, as we've rightly pointed out, was 22.6. So that was what has been used since PDS took over and the botched PDS thing and ECG came back. So Honorable Bauer was right in saying that what is in the tariff is actually the 22.6%. The rest ECG will have to tell us where they're going to get the money from to pay, and that adds up to their indebtedness. So let's understand that. In terms of what this all means again, let me say this. I mean, I think the power utilities must see Mr. Kojo Poku to tell them how they'll be able to do the combined total losses of technical and non-technical, how they can reduce it to up to 10%. I mean, I'm sure he's using the US benchmarks and stuff like that, which is good, which is where we have to be getting to, especially the non-technical losses. It's within our needs. The commercial losses, we should be able to deal with that. As for the technical losses, mostly it's engineering. I mean, of course, our machines are obsolete, but you can't do away with technical losses. But I'll be happy to engage Kojo on that to see how we can be able to do that under 10 or combined total of 10%. But as to what it means, I mean, we're already paying for example, the 24.6 or so percent that was recorded in 2018, which is the figure the Auditor General presented. It's actually 22.6% is already in the tariff that you and I pay, because there's a regulatory benchmark that will have to be in there because losses are part of the operation. So those are allowable. It's true that we can't continue to pay for losses, but to give you a sense of how difficult it is for them to reduce the losses even by 1%, PDS were asked to, according to the agreement, they were supposed to commit $500 million over a period of 5 years. And over in phases, every year, 100 million, that was actually going to translate to a yearly reduction of averagely 1% per year. So, I mean, it gives you a sense of if you're able to. So at the end of the first 5 years, they were supposed to reduce the losses by, I think, a combined total of 3%.
Did that happen? Did that happen?
Pardon?
Did that happen?
Oh, but they were there for 3 months before. They were only 3 months before they either they were sacked or they left.
Okay.
So it was just for 3 months. So we didn't see that happen. And in any case, they hadn't invested anything.
Okay.
So in terms of you and I mean, bottom line is that if we're able to reduce the losses, then we are not going to have, for example, if it comes to 15%, 18%, then it means that we are not going to make more allocation for the losses, and ultimately the tariff is supposed to come down. But as it is now, the regulatory benchmark is 22.6%. So the figure that you were quoting, in actual fact, the total losses that was allowed based on the purchases was supposed to be around 2,400 gigawatt hours, and they did 2,600 gigawatt hours. It's the difference of 186 gigawatt hours that nobody is paying for, but that is still not good enough. And we need to make sure that we reduce the losses. Historically, we haven't done well with technical losses. And when Honorable Bauer was in the ministry, I'm sure he knows that there were periods that ECG was doing 27%. As for NETCO, we don't even have to go there at all. So ultimately, let's try and reduce the losses. But what I need to explain is that, and what I believe my colleagues know, is that there is a direct correlation between investments and one's ability to reduce the losses.
All right. So,
except that for things like stealing and things like that, that is purely monitoring that somebody needs to do, and there has to be proper way of tracking these theft and stuff like that. Coupled with the fact that as we all complain, and that's a message that I probably will have to leave with every one of us who is listening, as we all complain about these losses, we are the same people who are not paying our electricity bill. We are the same people who collude with people and not pay the right tariff, tamper with meters, you're sleeping in air conditioners, but you bypass the meter. Those are the losses, and everybody is paying for that. So let's assume that our people are corrupt, the people in the utilities are corrupt.
And I'm happy that you talked about monitoring, because Kojofoku also made the point that it is somebody's job to ensure that this doesn't happen. And one other thing I'm happy about is that the report of the Auditor General is suggesting that people in procurement who have incurred these losses for the electricity company must be held liable for this. Indeed, the Minister for Energy has complained, and he's unhappy about it. He says this is a clear case of irresponsibility. Thankfully, Frank Anodompre, who is a member of the newly constituted board of the ECG, has joined us. I'm grateful for your time. Quickly, I want you to tell me how you intend to handle this mess at the ECG.
Well, good evening. First of all, I've been trying to follow the discussion, and it's been difficult, but so bear with me if I'm not in tune or I've not been following in terms of the flow. But to answer your question, it is not beyond that. We must also be fair to the new board, because, barely a week we were inaugurated. I also concede that we don't have time. We need to get to work. The board chairman has indicated his willingness and readiness to do the needful. And don't forget, he was the same board chairman, so he comes with a lot of institutional memory. Not to quickly venture into this audit report, but we've been given a bit of a profile of the situation as it is now. And if you talk about the debt level, you talk about the losses, you talk about QREC certain tariffs and all the inconsistencies and the concerns that have come up. So there's a whole range of issues at hand that has to be dealt with. I guess going forward, we may have to prioritize, but what comes up, which we need to flag it, is the new report from the Audit. The Auditor General report. That is extremely important. And if you look at the monies involved, it's something we need to tackle headlong and deal with. If it gets to the point where people should be prosecuted, I think that we should. But the challenge is bigger than it appears, because there is a sea of players, the people of this country, or the engagement that the ECG had gone into, which is not annoying to the benefits of the ECG. If you realize, most of the people who are indebted to ECG are invariably government institutions, the department agencies and ministries. So it's really a difficult situation. But thankfully, we've had some engagement with the Ministry of Finance, who are beginning to look at how we can, as it were, reinvest and better appreciate the debt hanging over the neck of ECG and how we can deal with it. And over the few weeks that we've been in office, a fleeting period, there have been some very positive engagement. Thankfully, I must thank the board chairman and other board members who are also bringing their experience to bear. And we pray that we'll be able to formalize this engagement.
Are you promising us that you prosecute people who are liable in this one?
No, I'm not. I cannot say that often and say that yes, we are going to prosecute people. But we have to go into the facts of the case. And Auditor General's report often comes with a recommendation. And I am saying that is my point of view. If we want to make a meaningful headway by way of lifting ECG from where it is now and putting it on a higher pedestal where ECG will become a much more efficient, public enterprise, then where the Auditor General makes the recommendation, we may have to follow it. Even if it means prosecuting, we may have to set this example. Elsewhere, other jurisdictions, I will not cite any example far away, even Côte d'Ivoire here, if you look at their regime and what happens there are punitive measures of people who flout the laws, people who pilfer power and engage in all sorts of malfeasance. They are dealt with according to law. So we may have to take a cue from there. But the substantive matter at hand is that the debt level at the ECG is overbearing. It's just overbearing.
And government is to be blamed for part of it, most of it.
Yeah, most of it is the legacy debt as is described, legacy debt. But I must also concede that, as the person who was speaking with you was saying, there are real losses, technical and commercial losses. Some of them could be avoided, okay? Right. And I guess going forward, we may have to prioritize and deal with this losses, which will have a toll or a telling effect on whether we are going to add on to the debt levels or we are going to reduce it. So there's a mammoth work at hand. But I guess if we tread with caution, one at a time, we will be able to make some significant impact.
All right. I must say that you don't have the luxury of time, so you need to get to work. But Ms. Anodompre talks about the fact that the situation is very difficult, the situation at hand, which is difficult. But let's break this down. ECG lost 24.30. You say currently it is what, 26.63 in of power purchase from power producing companies, despite the creation of revenue protection divisions and installation of automatic meter readings and all of that. That translates into what? 24.3% loss in its revenue?
So before, my brother who's just been put on the board, congratulations to him and congratulations to the board. But for me, what we've been saying year on year is that, look, before you can solve the problem, you have to stop the reoccurring of the debt. Okay. Because if not, you are chasing the debt. Yeah. We all heard Mr. Jakon when he went to the vetting committee and said, look, there is 2 point this, there's this, and we're going to... Big problem in 2017, government of the day did not stop the reoccurring of the debt. Okay. Day on day, the debt keep piling up. Okay. So if they want to seriously... The first order of the day for the board is to look at how do we stop the reoccurring of the debt. Okay. So that when you stop that, then you know how much debt is there, then you tackle it. But if you tackle it without stopping the reoccurring, which is the only way to do that, is to prepaid all these government institutions. Okay. And the president or our president have said it over and over. So for me, it's a small advice for them if they will take it fine. But let me clarify a few things. Our brother Bawa did some small mischief. He said, oh, the minister came and said 26 to the parliament and then 31 to World Bank. It's simple. There's 5% of transmission losses. So if the minister told World Bank 31%, it's 26 plus 5, which is the distribution losses of 26% plus the 5% transmission losses, which is what is probably making my brother, which he knows. I know he knows very well. So let's not leave that one there for Mr. Bauer and his little mischief. But the small issue that I want to look at is the metering problem, which is part of the Auditor General report. Yeah. The meters that were in the warehouse. My small checks that I have done today, it is not as a matter of neglect at ECG that caused that meters to be in the warehouse. Okay. It is a grand scheme of fraud. Okay. And I am confident to call it fraud because I have done enough checks. How? Look, there were a contract issued to a company called LNR. LNR were given a contract of $40 million. Okay. That $40 million, they were given, on sign of the contract, they were given $12 million cash sent to their account. Okay. Then they were given an LC of $24 million. Then upon completion and supply of the contract, they will be given another $4 million. That will make $40 million. LNR were given $12 million. They brought a container full of whatever they called it. ECG, as per the contract given to LNR, was to do certain things. Either go and inspect the machines or the meters before they are packaged. That wasn't done. There have to be something called a type test. Okay, there should be a type test report, which should be sent to ECG by an accredited agency. That wasn't done. Okay. ECG woke up one morning. There was a container at Tema purported to be some of the meters being sent. ECG was like, hey, we have not inspected your factory where the meters are being produced. We've not gotten the type test report. We've not gotten anything from you. How can you just ship containers into a container of meters to the country? We will not accept it. Okay. The container was in the port, accruing demurrage. Pressure was put on ECG to accept this container full of the so-called meters. That was the meters that Auditor General talks of. But there has been a problem with that LNR company from 2016 till today. Okay. All right, so I'll take a break on PM Express. When I return, we'll be finding out how to deal with the inefficiencies at the ECG. Indeed, the board member, Anodompre, has promised that they are getting to work and they'll be ensuring that some of these things are dealt with. But Kojo is advising that we need to stop the losses before we can do anything else. Mr. Bao, when I return, I'll give you the opportunity to also respond to some of the issues that have been raised. But also, finally, what struck me the most in that report is the fact that 11,581,000 worth of electrical materials were given to a company without any agreement. It was given to them on loan without any agreement. I want to find out who runs a company like this. Stay with me.